I used to believe loyalty was the foundation of a family, that if you loved hard enough, sacrificed enough, you could keep everything from falling apart. I clung to that belief like a lifeline, until it broke. For as long as I can remember, I've been the responsible one, the fixer, the rock, as my mom would say with a tired smile. It wasn't a compliment, it was a silent assignment. So when my parents came to me one night, eyes heavy with defeat, asking me to help fund Liam's college expenses, I said yes without asking too many questions. I was told they were broke, drowning in bills, and too proud to ask anyone else. Liam's scholarships barely made a dent, and apparently I was the only one who could save his future. I should have asked why I was the emergency fund. I should have noticed the cracks in their story, but I didn't. I just nodded and whispered, "I'll take care of it." For the next year and a half, I worked myself to the bone. Days blurred into nights. I took every gig I could find, freelance design work, late night shifts answering phones, even doing someone's wedding invitations for half price just to make ends meet. I moved into a cheaper apartment, one with creaky floors and windows that hissed in the wind. I stopped buying clothes. My once cherished Sunday brunches became instant oatmeal and tap water. I told myself it was temporary, that it was worth it, because Liam was my baby brother, and that meant something to me. Meanwhile, he seemed untouched by struggle, always dressed sharp, always showing up at family dinners with something new, noise-canceling headphones, a limited edition watch, even the latest iPhone that hadn't been out a month. When I asked about it, he smirked and said his girlfriend Ava spoiled him. I remember smiling, trying not to let the bitterness slip through. Good for him, I thought. At least he's not wasting my money. That was the last peaceful thought I'd have for a while. It was a Tuesday night. I remember because Tuesdays were the only evenings. I didn't work. I had just walked in after a long day at the agency. A last-minute freelance assignment had kept me glued to my screen for 12 hours straight. The house was unusually loud. Laughter, not just any laughter. Carefree, full-bellied, familiar, the kind I hadn't heard from my parents in years. For a moment, I paused in the hallway, letting the sound wrap around me like a memory I didn't trust. Then I heard Liam say it. Honestly, it's hilarious. We haven't spent a dime on school, and she's out there killing herself for it. My heart stopped. I thought I misheard. I stood frozen as my dad chuckled and said something like, "Well, it's not like we could tell her about the extra money. She'd lose her mind." Then Liam again, light, smug exactly. "She thinks Ava's spoiling me. Meanwhile, I've been getting 1,000 a week. Life's never been better." There are moments when reality punches you so hard that your body moves before your mind catches up. That was one of them. I pushed open the kitchen door. The laughter died instantly. 3 pairs of eyes turned to me, wide, caught, and for a second, annoyed. That flicker of inconvenience on Liam's face, like I had ruined a good joke, burned more than anything. "What the hell did I just hear?" I asked. My voice was calm, but something beneath it cracked. Silence. My mom wouldn't meet my eyes. My dad tried to speak, but I didn't let him. 1,000 a week? I said, louder this time. "You've been giving him that, while I've been scraping by to cover his tuition?" Still, no answer. "I've been living off microwaved noodles and selling my old clothes just to make sure he graduates." "You said you had nothing. You begged me." Liam, bless his entitled little heart, finally spoke, eyes rolling like this was some kind of overreaction. "Okay, calm down. It's not like you're broke or something." That was it. That's when something in me snapped. Not in anger. Not yet, but in clarity. This wasn't just about money. This was about the stories we're fed in families, the invisible contracts, the guilt-laced expectations, the lie that being the good child means being the sacrificial one. I looked at all 3 of them and realized I'd been cast in a role I never auditioned for, and I was done playing it. No one moved. You'd think after everything I'd heard, someone would try to explain, to soften the blow, to lie better, but they just stood there, my family, rooted to the kitchen floor like they were waiting for the storm to pass. I was the storm. "I sold my car," I said. "Did you know that, Liam?" Still, silence. "I sold my car," I repeated, slower this time, "so you could have your damn textbooks and meal plan. I've been skipping meals, turning down holidays, and pulling 18-hour days. And you've been cashing checks for what? Shoes? Gadgets? Ava's rent?" My mom stepped in like she always did when things got uncomfortable. Her voice trembled, as if she were the one who'd been betrayed. "We didn't mean for it to go this way. We just didn't want to burden you with everything all at once." I laughed. I actually laughed. Sharp, humorless. You didn't want to burden me, so you lied to me for over a year. My dad finally found his voice. Rachel, it was supposed to be temporary. We had some money saved, not enough for tuition, but we thought Liam deserved something for himself while he was working so hard. Liam scoffed. It's not like I asked for it. That's when I stopped being stunned and started being angry. Deep, righteous anger. The kind that doesn't just burn, it clarifies. You didn't ask for it? I snapped. You bragged about it. You sat there laughing about how dumb I was to believe you. You lied with a smirk on your face. Liam shrugged, like I was making a big deal out of nothing. You offered to help. No one forced you. No, I said, voice icy. You just manipulated me into thinking I was the only thing standing between you and failure. I looked at my parents. You told me you had no one, that you were broke, that if I didn't step up, Liam's future was over. My dad rubbed his temples like he was the one overwhelmed. We just wanted what was best for Liam. And what about me? I said, louder now. Do I not count? Or am I just the bank account with legs? That line, I saw it hit them, especially my mom. Her eyes welled up, but I didn't care. Not anymore. I'd cried enough for all of us. Something inside me settled. I was done. I'm out, I said. I'm done paying for his school. I'm done working myself into the ground for people who lie to my face. I'm done being used. My mom's head snapped up. Rachel, you can't just, I can. And I am. I turned on my heel and walked straight to my room, heart thudding in my ears. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I packed a duffel bag with just enough to get me through a week. My laptop, my documents, some cash. I left without another word. The first thing I did was call the university. I explained, calmly and professionally, that I had been the financial provider for Liam's tuition. The payments were all from my personal account. I asked if there was any way to pause or block further charges. Apparently, there was. They froze his enrollment the next day. Then I called my bank. Big mistake on my part. In hindsight, I'd added my parents to a joint account early on to make things easier. Never again. I had it locked, frozen, drained into a separate account in my name only. Then I breathed for the first time in months. It was petty, maybe, but it was justice. When I came back to the house 2 days later, not to stay, just to pick up a few more things, the storm had officially arrived. They were all waiting in the living room like some sort of intervention gone wrong. You froze the account? My dad barked. Yes, I said flatly. How is Liam supposed to pay for classes now? My mom demanded. That's not my problem anymore. Liam rolled his eyes. Wow, so dramatic. I turned to him. I heard you. Every word. You laughed about how I was your fool. How I was out there suffering while you bought whatever shiny thing you wanted. So don't call me dramatic for walking away. He shrugged, looking away. I looked at my parents. You want him to have the best future? Great. Then you pay for it. We can't, my mom whispered. You could. You just didn't want to. She opened her mouth to argue, but I was already halfway up the stairs. I packed in silence while they argued below. By the time I walked out that door, no one stopped me. The next few weeks were quiet, eerily so. I moved into a friend's place temporarily. Small, dusty, but mine. No emotional blackmail clinging to the walls. No guilt waiting at the dinner table. For the first time in years, I felt like I was living for me. No more overdraft warnings. No more begging for extensions on bills because I'd wired too much into Liam's tuition account. I still worked hard. It's who I am. But there was peace in that work now. Then, a knock at the door. It was my mother. She stood there with a casserole dish, like this was some sitcom misunderstanding, like a warm meal could erase betrayal. Can we talk? She asked. I didn't want to, but I let her in. She sat at my small kitchen table, fingers nervously tracing the rim of the dish. We miss you, she said. I said nothing. It's not the same without you. I leaned back. Arms folded. What do you want? She hesitated, then sighed. Things have been difficult since you left. I almost laughed. You mean since I stopped funding the family? She looked away, ashamed, or maybe just caught. I just thought, maybe it's time to put this behind us. Start fresh. I stared at her. You didn't come here to apologize. You came here because the money ran out. She didn't deny it. And that's when the idea hit me. All right, I said. I'll consider helping again, but only if I have access to everything. No more secrets. She blinked. Everything? Bank accounts, spending history, savings. If I'm going to help, I want to know the full picture. You want me to trust you? Then show me you're worth trusting. After a long pause, She nodded. I'll talk to your father. I nodded once. Good. Take it or leave it. It didn't take long. Once I had access to their financials, the mask came off. There wasn't just a modest savings account. There were multiple accounts, and not small ones either. These were padded with years of tucked away funds. Money they claimed didn't exist. Money that wasn't for emergencies, as they always said. It wasn't even just for Liam. There were vacations, online shopping, a generous line of credit no one ever mentioned. I stared at the statements in disbelief, line after line of indulgence, all while I had been living like a ghost of myself. They weren't broke, they were just hiding. I printed it all out, slid it into a folder, and called a family meeting. They arrived cautiously, like they already knew they'd been found out. Liam looked smug, my dad neutral, my mom fidgeting with her wedding ring. I didn't waste time. You lied to me, I said, tossing the folder on the table like it was evidence in court. You weren't struggling. You were saving yourself while I burned out for you. My mom opened her mouth. I held up a hand. I'm not here for apologies. I'm here to tell you this. I'm done. Truly done. We didn't want to use it unless we had to. My dad tried. You had to the second you asked me to drain myself, I said. And you didn't. You let me suffer so you could keep your comforts. I just wanted to make sure Liam didn't feel deprived, my mom said quietly, and I guess I don't matter. She blinked rapidly. My dad stared at the papers, defeated. Liam, of course, said nothing. I didn't expect a resolution. I just wanted it on record. They had a choice, and they chose Liam over and over again. So I chose myself. I walked out and blocked their numbers that night. Weeks passed. No calls, no texts, nothing but quiet. For once, I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. I had kicked it off myself. I focused on work. I got back into running, picked up a few design clients who actually paid on time, and started to feel human again. The weight of being the responsible one was gone, and in its place, space, peace. Then came the call. It was Liam. I almost didn't answer, but something in me said, listen. Hey, he started. I know you don't want to hear from me, but you need to know what mom and dad are doing. I said nothing. They're trying to get a loan, he continued. In your name. My stomach turned. What? I overheard them talking. They said it was the only way to stay afloat, that they still had your info from when you added them to the joint account. I felt cold all over, like the air had thickened. Rachel, Liam added, softer now. They're desperate and reckless. I hung up and immediately checked my credit report. There it was, a new inquiry from a bank I didn't recognize. Not approved yet, but pending. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I acted. I drove straight to their house. George opened the door like he'd seen a ghost. Rachel, I walked past him, straight into the living room, and held up the report. You actually did it. Linda stood up from the couch, hands up like she could erase this. We can explain. Explain what? I snapped. That after everything you already took from me, you decided to steal my identity? It was just temporary, my dad said. We were going to pay it back. You weren't going to tell me. That's what matters. We didn't know what else to do, my mom cried. We're behind on bills, and Liam's. No, I cut her off. You don't get to drag Liam into this again. I stared at them, these two people I used to admire, and all I saw were users, liars, thieves. You always have an excuse, I said. But this is a crime. I walked out before they could speak again. That night, I filed a fraud report with the bank. I didn't press charges. I couldn't bring myself to do that. But I made damn sure the loan was denied and the attempt documented. They'd never be able to touch my name again. The next week was quiet. No knocks, no calls, just the slow unraveling of the last threads holding us together. Then something unexpected happened. A letter, handwritten, no return address. I almost threw it out, but I didn't. It was from Liam. In it, he admitted to knowing more than he let on. He'd known for months that our parents had lied, that the money wasn't just for him, that they were hoarding it while I suffered. I didn't know how to stop it, he wrote, and I didn't want to lose the comfort I'd always had. There was no excuse in the letter, just guilt. He told me he'd dropped out of college for the semester, that he got a part-time job, that he was working on paying me back, not because I asked, but because it was right. He ended it with, seeing you finally stand up for yourself made me realize I've never once stood up for you. I want to change that. I didn't know how to feel. Part of me was still furious. Part of me was tired. But there was a small piece, a quiet one, that felt like maybe, just maybe, there was still someone in my family worth keeping. I didn't respond to Liam's letter right away. For a long time, I kept it tucked in the back of my nightstand drawer, beneath old receipts and forgotten notebooks, close, but not visible. I didn't know what to do with it. Every time I reread it, I found something new. A sentence that felt sincere. A line that felt too easy. Maybe that's what trust becomes after it's broken. A constant inspection of intent. But a few months later, Liam reached out again. Not through our parents, not with money talk. Just a text. I know I don't deserve it, but if you're willing, I'd like to talk. I miss my sister. It sat in my notifications for 2 days. On the third, I replied, "One coffee, your treat." We met at a local cafe just off campus, neutral ground. He looked different, not physically, but in his posture, in how he avoided eye contact at first. His voice was softer, stripped of its usual arrogance. "I didn't expect you to come," he said as he handed me a cup. I almost didn't, even if it was small. He sent screenshots, updates. He once said, "I don't want you to ever think I forgot." He didn't expect me to say thank you. He just did it. I helped him a few times. Nothing big. A quick proofread on an essay. Picking up an old graphing calculator I found on Facebook Marketplace. I didn't save him. That wasn't my role anymore. But I supported him, gently, like a sister, like the kind of person he needed to become for himself. And slowly, I let him back in. The first time we laughed again, really laughed, was at the DMV. He had messed up his address and brought the wrong paperwork. I teased him mercilessly, and he took it, smiling, not defensive. It was like we were siblings again, different but better. I kept my boundaries, always. I paid attention to red flags, to exhaustion, to guilt. If something didn't feel right, I said it, and Liam respected it. That's how I knew he was changing. Months passed. One day, while we were getting lunch, he handed me an envelope. Inside was a check, larger than I expected. "I got a design internship," he said. Finally, I raised an eyebrow. "You didn't have to do this." "I know," he replied. "That's why it matters." We didn't talk about our parents. Not anymore. I knew he had limited contact, birthdays, maybe holidays, but the lines were clear. "I can't unsee what they did," he told me once, "but I can stop being who they raised me to be." Sometimes, I wonder what would have happened if I never walked into that kitchen. If I hadn't heard them laughing, would they have kept the secret forever? Would I have lost another year? Another piece of myself? But I don't live in that question anymore. What I do know is this. There's strength in drawing a line, in saying, this far and no further. There's power in knowing that you can love people and still walk away when they poison the well. There's healing in watching someone change, not for you, but because they finally want to be better. And there's peace in choosing yourself. I didn't get the happy ending I once imagined. I didn't get parents who realized their mistakes, fell to their knees, and begged for forgiveness. But I did get me back, and somehow I got a brother too. Not the one I used to carry, but one who learned to stand. Story 2, I never thought a single dinner could rewrite how I saw my family or my future. But here we are. My name's Evan. I'm 29, work in software. And up until last year, I considered myself relatively lucky in the family department. I have 2 sisters, supportive and grounded. My parents, while occasionally overbearing, were still part of my life after a rocky past. And then there's my younger brother, Ryan. He's 27, cocky, charming when he wants to be, and the perpetual favorite in our family. Our dynamic had always been tense but manageable until Jen. Jen is 27, smart, funny, beautiful, in a way that makes people stop mid-sentence. We met at a cozy little bar shortly after I moved back to my hometown last fall. One drink turned into 3, which turned into us talking until the bartender politely asked us to leave because they were closing. It wasn't instant love, but it was close. We started dating soon after. It felt natural, right even. By Christmas, I knew I wanted my family to meet her. That's when things started getting weird. See, I'm not the most forthcoming person when it comes to relationships. So while my family knew I was seeing someone, I hadn't given them the full download. When I showed them a picture of Jen at Christmas dinner, Ryan's face twisted like he just tasted sour milk. He snatched the phone from my mom's hands and stormed out of the room. Seconds later, he came back yelling, "You're dating her? Are you out of your mind?" Apparently, Jen was his ex. They had dated for about a month over a year prior, but I had no clue. I wasn't even in town back then. Ryan ended things because he got bored his words, not mine. Jen confirmed the story when I asked. They dated briefly. She thought he was emotionally immature, and when he ghosted her, she moved on. It should have ended there, but of course, it didn't. Ryan stewed about it for weeks, made snide comments during family events, gave Jen cold stares whenever we ran into each other, and even tried to pull me aside one night to talk man to man about how wrong it was to date someone he had claimed. I told him to get over it. When Jen's birthday rolled around in February, I planned a dinner with both our families and close friends. It felt like the perfect time to propose. Everything was perfect until Ryan decided to make it about himself. Again, he interrupted the proposal loudly, started ranting about betrayal, about family loyalty, about how I was stealing from him. My sisters told him to shut up. Jen looked shaken but said yes anyway. I figured that would be the last of it. Wrong. 2 months later, Ryan invited us to his place for a family dinner. My parents were going, my sisters too. I assumed he was extending an olive branch. Nope. Halfway through the evening, in front of everyone, he got on one knee and proposed to Jen. With a ring, a cheap one. At that, Jen was mortified. My dad tried to pull him up by the arm, but I beat him to it and punched Ryan square in the jaw. He didn't fight back. He just stood there, grinning. I wanted to prove something, he said. I wanted to see if she'd say yes to me instead. Jen called him pathetic. I called him something worse. Our parents rushed to separate us. My mom kept telling me to calm down like I was the problem. We left without saying goodbye. The next few days were a blur of frustration, confusion, and awkward conversations. I was terrified Jen would second-guess marrying into my family, but she didn't. She was angry, yes, but not at me. Still, the damage was done, and this wasn't over yet. After the disaster at Ryan's place, Jen and I took a few days to ourselves. No family calls, no texts, just silence. I couldn't stop playing the scene over in my head. Him kneeling with that knockoff ring, smug as hell, like he was pulling off some brilliant social experiment. The worst part? My mom had the nerve to call it a misunderstanding, like he'd tripped and accidentally proposed to my fiancé. Eventually, I called Ryan. I didn't want to, but I needed answers. We met at my place. I told him Jen would be there too. Surprisingly, he agreed. He showed up acting like this was a casual catch-up over beers. No apology. No awkward tension from his end. Just a hey and a shrug, like nothing had happened. I started off with an apology of my own, told him. I shouldn't have hit him, even though he earned it. He brushed it off. Whatever, man. I get it. I asked him straight up, what was that proposal really about? He leaned back on the couch, arms stretched out like he was relaxing at a barbecue, and said, it wasn't about her. It was about you. What? He explained that after hearing about our relationship, one of his buddies planted a seed in his head that maybe Jen was using me to get back at him, that maybe she had planned it from the start. I looked at Jen. She was stone-faced. He went on, saying his friend had seen Jen at the same places they used to hang out and figured she hadn't moved on. That when she showed up with me, it was some kind of revenge plot. Jen snapped. You really think I'm the type of person to play someone for months, just to get back at you over a month-long fling you ended? Ryan just shrugged. I mean, you were asking about me after the breakup. She laughed. Once, I asked if you were seeing someone because I didn't want things to get awkward if we ran into each other. That's it. He kept brushing everything off like it was no big deal, like we were overreacting to a harmless prank. Then he dropped this gem. Look, if it was me, I would have broken it off the second I found out you dated her. I stared at him, but I didn't know. You never told me. I had no idea you even dated her until months into the relationship. Still, he said, you should have ended it. That was when I realized he didn't care about Jen. He didn't even care about me. It was about control, about ego, about not liking the idea that someone he casually tossed aside chose someone else, especially me. So I asked, if you don't have feelings for her, and this isn't about love, why propose? He hesitated. Then he admitted the whole thing was a test, a setup. He wanted to see if Jen would leave me for him, prove, once and for all, that he still had it. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Jen calmly responded, you wanted to humiliate me just to satisfy your ego. That's disgusting. Ryan muttered a half-hearted apology, but it was clear he didn't mean it. Not really. Before he left, he said, You can take back the wedding invite. I'm not coming. I can't support you marrying someone I dated, even if it was short. I told him, don't worry, you weren't invited anymore anyway. After he left, I felt a little better, but not much. Jen and I talked for hours that night about boundaries, about family, about what kind of future we wanted. I told her I'd stand by her no matter what, and she said the same. But then came the real storm. My mom called a few days later and asked if Ryan was still uninvited. I told her yes, and she lost it. You're being petty, she said. He made a mistake. He was just joking. I asked her if she'd still feel that way if someone proposed to her while she was engaged. She avoided the question. It's different, she said. He's your brother. That line again, family over everything except, apparently, respect. She told me she wouldn't come to the wedding either if Ryan wasn't allowed. I told her, that's your choice, but I'm not begging anyone to be part of our day. She hung up without another word. At my younger sister Leah's birthday a week later, the tension finally spilled out in public. Leah's boyfriend proposed. Everyone clapped, and then she joked, "You're not gonna ban Ryan from my wedding too, right?" I laughed. "It's your wedding. Invite whoever you want." But Mom? She glared at me like I'd just spat in the birthday cake. Later that night, she cornered me again, accused me of breaking up the family, said I was letting a little drama ruin everything. I reminded her, Ryan tried to sabotage my engagement. She said I was insecure. Jen, bless her, stayed quiet the whole time. She didn't want to escalate things, even though I could see how hard she was biting her tongue. When we got home, Jen said, I can't deal with your mom's energy much longer. I knew what she meant. It was getting harder to protect our peace, and things were only going to get worse. A couple of weeks passed after the Leah birthday drama. I was trying to focus on work, on wedding planning, on anything other than my family. But it's hard to move forward when the past keeps tugging at your sleeve. My mom showed up unannounced. Jen and I were eating dinner, just us, candles lit. The whole bit when there was a knock at the door. I opened it, and there she was, standing on the porch like she hadn't just told me she wouldn't come to my wedding over my pettiness. I just want to talk, she said. Jen looked at me. I looked at her. We both sighed. So I let her in. Jen made her a plate out of pure kindness, and we all sat down. I kept the conversation calm, even when my mom started pushing again. You're really not inviting Ryan? She asked between bites. No, I said. We already talked about this. She shook her head like I was a kid refusing to share toys. He made a mistake, a dumb, emotional one. But he's your brother. I don't care. He doesn't want to come, and I don't want him there. End of story. Then she turned to Jen. I was hoping to talk to you alone, maybe get you to see my side of things. That's when I realized she didn't come here to make peace. She came here to pressure Jen. Without me around, Jen calmly said, I wouldn't have that kind of conversation without Evan. This involves both of us. My mom let out this bitter laugh. You can't even speak for yourself without him? What? He controls your mouth now. That's when things flipped. Jen stood up. Excuse me? I'm just saying, my mom snapped. You're tearing this family apart, and you're too simple to even see it. Jen froze. I stood up. Mom, that's enough. If you're going to insult my fiancé, you need to leave. But she didn't leave. She kept ranting, loud, accusing, blaming Jen for everything from Ryan's embarrassment to the wedding drama to my attitude. When Jen went to unlock the door to show her out, my mom grabbed her by the hair. She yanked Jen back so hard she hit the ground. I saw red. I pulled my mom off her, shoved her out the door, and slammed it shut while she screamed from the porch. She pounded on the door for a good 5 minutes, yelling about betrayal, about how I'd chosen her over family, about how I was dead to her. Then, silence. Jen was bruised, but okay, physically at least. Emotionally, she was shaken. I asked if she wanted to go to the police. She said no. She just wanted her out of our lives for good. I agreed, but I still documented everything. Pictures, texts, a timeline of the incident, just in case. I called my sisters. Maggie and Leah came over within the hour. Maggie brought ice cream. Leah brought wine. Jen's mom showed up too. They surrounded her, sat with her, made her laugh again. I could have cried out of gratitude. The next day I called my dad and told him what happened. He tried to downplay it. She's under a lot of stress, he said. The family's falling apart. No, Dad, I replied. It's been broken for a long time. You just refuse to see it. He asked if Jen was okay. I said yes, thanks to people who actually cared about her. That was the end of the conversation. After that, The smear campaign began. Texts, voicemails, Facebook messages. My mom told her side of the story to anyone who'd listen, painting me as ungrateful and Jen as manipulative. She left out the part where she attacked someone in our home, of course. My inbox turned into a war zone. Extended family cousins I hadn't seen in years started messaging me, telling me to forgive and forget. That family was more important than ego, that it was just hair pulling. I blocked them all. Then Ryan texted me. I heard what happened. I'm staying out of it. That was it. No apology. No check-in. Just distancing himself so he wouldn't get dragged in. I didn't reply. Jen and I sat down and had the hardest conversation of our relationship that night. She looked at me and said, "I can't marry into a family like this." My heart sank until she finished her sentence. "Not unless we draw the line. Hard." So we did. We agreed. No contact with my parents. No more maybe one day, or what if they change? Just done. We also decided to move somewhere new, somewhere they wouldn't be able to just pop in. Jen's brother lives a few hours away, so we started looking near him. A fresh start sounded like salvation. I also started therapy. I needed to unpack decades of family mess I'd buried deep. Jen helped me find a counselor, someone I could talk to who wouldn't tell me to just forgive. 1 week later, I called my parents. They both got on the phone, probably thinking I was ready to be mature. Instead, I told them, "You won't be part of my wedding. You won't meet my future kids. You won't have a seat at our table. Ever." My mom started crying, blamed me, told me I was breaking her heart. I told her she broke mine years ago and that what she did to Jen was the final straw. "You're not the victim," I said. "You're the reason." My dad begged me to reconsider. I didn't. I told them both, "This is goodbye." Then I blocked their numbers. That night, I emailed every family member who had chimed in on the drama. I uninvited them all from the wedding except my sisters, aunt, and uncle. I included a link to the full story. And then, for the first time in months, I slept like a rock. After that final call, it was like a weight finally left my chest. Not in a victorious kind of way, more like when you exhale after holding your breath too long. I didn't feel good. I felt clear. Jen and I moved fast. We packed up our apartment and shifted our entire lives to a small town 3 hours away, near her brother's lake house. The city wasn't huge, but it had quiet streets, coffee shops that remembered your name, and no one who knew anything about my past, just the way we wanted it. We downsized the wedding. Jen's brother offered his lake house for the ceremony, and it couldn't have been more perfect. Wood decks wrapped around the house like arms. Water lapped just beyond the tree line, and the whole place smelled like pine and safety. There were maybe 20 people in attendance. Jen's side of the family came out strong: cousins, aunts, her childhood best friend from Wisconsin. My sisters were there, of course, along with my aunt and uncle. We didn't miss anyone who wasn't. Jen walked down a short path between trees instead of an aisle, barefoot and glowing. Wearing the dress, she said, made her feel like herself and not someone else's dream. I couldn't stop smiling. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't thinking about who was missing. I was finally focused on who was standing in front of me. We said our vows under a canopy her brother made out of branches and old fishing net. It was simple, honest, quiet, and perfect. No outbursts, no awkward speeches, just the wind, the water, and the promise that we were leaving everything toxic behind us. A month later, we found out Jen was pregnant. It was a surprise, but a welcome one, a needed one. That news hit me like sunrise through fog. I didn't realize how much light I needed until it was shining on me. We got a tiny rental near downtown, while I transferred to a different office. Jen landed a remote job and started knitting baby clothes on the couch while I cooked dinner. Every so often, I'd catch her smiling at nothing. That's when I knew we were finally safe. Then came the messages. First, from a random Facebook account, then another, all from my mother, who somehow got photos of our wedding, probably through my uncle. She ranted about being excluded, about how we owed her a chance to be part of her grandchild's life. She wanted visits. She wanted updates. She even asked to be in the delivery room. I blocked every account, saved screenshots, sent copies to myself just in case. She started messaging Jen too. Same tone, entitled, demanding, vicious under the surface. Jen didn't respond. She blocked her too. And yet, it didn't stop there. A week later, as I was leaving work, she showed up in the parking lot. I didn't recognize her at first. She looked different, tired, worn out, but her voice hadn't changed. "You're really doing this?" she asked. Throwing me away? I stayed calm. "You threw yourself away the night you attacked Jen." She started crying. Said we were ruining her life. Said we didn't understand how hard it was to be a mother. Then she hit me. Not hard. Just one of those open-handed slaps to the chest. Like a tantrum with no strength behind it. Security showed up and walked her off the property. I didn't press charges, but I did file a police report. It felt strange writing my own mother's name down like that, but I had to. Jen and I sat down that night and drew our line in the sand again, firmer this time. No more. We made a joint decision. We'd go no contact permanently with both my mom and dad. My dad, who never laid a hand but always looked the other way. The silence from him was its own kind of violence. I called him one last time, told him what happened, told him we were done. I'd hoped he might say something, anything to acknowledge how bad things had gotten. Instead, he asked if I could forgive her for the sake of the baby. I told him, my baby will never know the woman who attacked her mother. That's how I protect her. He didn't fight me, just sighed and said, okay. I sent out a final email to my extended family, uninviting anyone who still sided with my parents. I attached screenshots of messages, photos, and my account of the assault. I didn't ask for support, I just told the truth. Most didn't reply. A few did, some angry, some quietly supportive. But the silence from the rest told me all I needed to know. I haven't looked back. Jen gave birth to our daughter 5 months ago. She's tiny, loud, and has her mom's eyes. I still can't believe she's real. Every time I hold her, I think about how different her life will be. She'll never grow up wondering why her dad flinches when his mom raises her voice. She'll never watch her mother cry in the kitchen after being called worthless by the people who were supposed to love her. She'll never wonder if she's loved, because she is. Fully, fiercely. My sisters come by often. They've become the kind of aunts every kid dreams of, cool, funny, always sneaking in snacks and books and baby-sized band shirts. Jen's mom moved nearby too, and she's become a second mother to me in all the ways mine never was. As for Ryan, he called once, right after our honeymoon, said congrats, apologized. We talked. He sounded real. I don't know what kind of relationship we'll ever have, but I told him this much. If he wants to be in our lives, he has to show up as someone better, someone honest. We haven't spoken since, and honestly, I'm okay with that. Our lives now, they're quieter, smaller, but peaceful. And that peace, it's sacred. So to anyone out there struggling with family that keeps taking and never giving, let me say this. Blood might tie you together, but love is what holds you. Let go of the ones who hurt you. Hold on to the ones who don't. We did, and we're finally free.